Akseli Gallen-Kallela is one of the key figures in Finnish art of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. His works, which combine national motifs, symbolism and modernism, have become an integral part of Finland's cultural heritage. His life was full of creative exploration, innovation, and a relentless desire to capture the spirit of his homeland on canvas. I would like to thank everyone who subscribes to the channel, comments, shares videos, and likes them. Your activity makes a great contribution to the development of the channel and inspires me to new creative achievements. For those who have not yet subscribed, I sincerely invite you to join our creative community, where we meet interesting artists and their work. Akseli Gallen-Kallela, along with Albert Edelfelt, was one of Finland's outstanding artists. Above all, he laid the foundations for the formation of the Finnish national style in art and was a central figure in its development. He was also a pioneer in the graphic and applied arts, and became a source of inspiration for architects. The stages of Gallen-Kallella's life journey and his personality are fairly well researched. Onni Okkonen's large-scale work, 1949, together with the biography written by Kirsti Gallen-Kallela, based on her father's letters, give a very reliable picture of him. Okkonen's comments on the artist's work are more subjective. New research still better reveals to us the art of the master and creates an even more accurate picture. The Gallen family originated in the manor of Kallela, located in the small municipality of Lemmu near Turku. Talk of aristocratic descent, which the artist himself was fond of, was an obvious manifestation of artistic romanticism. The youngest son of the family, supported by his older brother, also left Lemmu, going to study to become an official. Peter Wilhelm Gallen, 1817 to 1879, followed his brother as early as 1840 and was appointed lensman in Turvaja. In 1841 he married his brother's adopted daughter Sophia Antoinette, whose share of the inheritance of the Rustgalt and Vanny he later bought in his own name. Sophia Antoinette died in 1855, leaving 5 children. In 1858 Peter Gallen entered into a new marriage to Mathilde, daughter of the sea captain and shipowner Bror Matthias Valros. From 1862 to 1867, Peter Gallen served in the office of the Bank of Finland in Pori. In 1865, a third child, Axel Waldemar Gallen, was born to the family. 4 more children were born after him, so that there were 12 children in this large family. After leaving his position at the bank, Peter Gallen became a private lawyer in Turvaja. The artist's mother Matilda Gallen was a woman spiritualized and with a strong will, whose worldview in 1870-80 IES experienced a turning point, which manifested itself in the departure from the official church and religious dogmas. Later she became interested in spiritualism and theosophy. Mathilde Gallen was a keen amateur painter and, like Alexander Edelfelt, took an interest in her son's artistic career. In 1867 the family moved from Pori back to Turvaja, where Peter Gallen bought the Jotsi estate and built a new spacious house. Akseli received his first lessons from his home teachers, and then in 1876 he and his 2 brothers were sent to the Swedish Normal Lyceum in Helsinki. There he remained until 1881, completing 3 grades. He kindled a desire to pursue art. From 1878 to 1881 he attended evening courses at the Art Society's art school. From 1880 to 1881, Gallen also studied at the Central School of Applied Arts. Interrupting his studies at the Normal Lyceum in the fall of 1881, he transferred to the Day School of Art. In 1883 he moved to a class in drawing from nature, with teacher Friedrich Alst. From 1881 to 1882 he took private lessons from S.A. Kiiniainen, and from 1883 to 1884 from Albert Edelfelt. He took private lessons from Albert Edelfelt. Between 1882 and 1884 he also studied at Adolf von Becker's private academy and made drawings in the anatomical hall of the university. Gallen belonged to a generation that could already get a very good education without traveling abroad. Adolf von Becker was for him the most authoritative teacher in the field of French realism, and the influence of plein-air painting Edelfelt noticeable. For example, in the work The Boy and the Raven, 1884, already in the summer of 1884, the young man became acquainted with August Strindberg's naturalistic credo, formulated in one of his collections of poems. The influence of naturalism is manifested in the painting of the year Rotting Pike Perch, 1884. In the fall of 1884, Gallen went to Paris and studied at the Académie Julienne. As much as the teachers of the time, acquaintances played a role. In particular, he met Strindberg, thanks to the exhibition organized in the spring of 1885 in memory of Jules Bastien-Lepage. He became close to this master of naturalistic plein-air painting. In the summer of 1885, Gallen returned to his homeland, and in the fall, while in Salo, began the painting The Old Woman and the Cat. The sitter served as a local woman who lived with sheep. The painting was only half painted. He added the cat in Helsinki and finished the background from his sketches made in Turvaja. He continued this work in Paris, where the painting was sent after him in early 1886. The painting followed Strindberg's naturalism, according to which truth was more valuable than beauty. The influence of Bastien-Lepage was also strong. At the exhibition of the Finnish Art Society in the fall, the painting aroused contradictory opinions. The conservative-minded disapproved of the unsightliness of the painting, while the liberals enthusiastically embraced the work. A trip to Paris in 1885 to 1886, realized on a state scholarship and funds sent by his mother, was as successful as the previous one. The most significant work was a portrait commissioned by the physician G.F. Antel. In the summer of 1886, returning to his homeland, Gallen settled in Korpilahti, where he wrote, in particular, small paintings dedicated to ordinary people: Woman with Hand Millstones, Woman, Frying Ash, and Beggar Boy. After Paris, he longed for Finnish subjects, and in December he moved to Kourou, where he settled on the Ikola Torpedo. The largest works of this winter were Peasant Life, later Disappeared, and The First Lesson. In the summer of 1887, Gallen painted an interior portrait, commissioned by the patron of the artist-industrialist G.A. Serlachius. The same year dates the portrait of Mary Slur, Gallen's future wife. Gallen had long been a member of the family of the phenophile Karl Slur and was in love with his daughter. Gallen was in Paris from the fall of 1887 to the summer of 1889. He continued his studies at the Académie Julienne and, in addition, worked at the Atelier Cormoni from 1887 to 1888. His Paris paintings were marked by passion. Small works depicted cityscapes in a style reminiscent of Impressionism. He was commissioned by Antel in late 1888 to paint Demaski, which anticipated Symbolism. During this period, Gallen began depicting scenes from the Kalevala epic. For many years the epic had already occupied his mind. He began with the triptych Aino, completed in 1889. At the World Exhibition in Paris in the same year it received a medal of the second degree. In June 1889 Gallen returned to Finland with the Swedish artist Count Louis Perret, whom he had met in Paris. The friends traveled first to Visavisi and from there to Ikola in Kourou, as Gallen wanted to introduce his friend to the world he had discovered there. The main work painted during another stay in Kourou can be considered the painting in the sauna. In May 1890, Gallen married Mary Slur. The newlyweds made a wedding trip to Kumo, where they were joined by Sperre. The men traveled to White Sea Karelia for a couple of weeks. Gallen was preparing to paint a new version of the triptych Aino commissioned by the state and hoped to find new images and subjects for the work. His plans also included participation in a new competition for the creation of illustrations to Kalevala, announced by the student community of Karelia Savo, works for which were accepted until March 1891. A month before that, the competition for the mural painting of the university auditorium, in which he had been invited to participate, had ended. Gallen and Sperry's trip served as the initial impetus for an artistic movement focused on Karelia, later called Karelianism. In the fall of 1890, the newspaper Päivilehti published a program article on the importance of Karelia for art and literature. Hopes for a Finnish Renaissance were associated with Karelia. In 1894 Gallen wrote, "A new Renaissance must now begin in Little Finland, that is, a new power and life, a new world. This is necessary now, when wretchedness, weakness and dismal decadence reign all around." The Fennoman movement finally achieved political and economic power, which was reflected in cultural life as well. The new triptych Aino was completed in 1891. The composition of the painting had not changed significantly, but the final result was more refined thanks to the Finnish sitters. The following year the work won the state competition for portrait painting. Gallen won the competition for illustrating the Kalevala by a large margin, but was only second in the competition for the mural painting of the University Auditorium. Edelfelt was commissioned to create the main part of the mural depicting the inauguration of the ABO Academy, and the prize money was divided between the other two participants invited to the competition, Gallen and Eero Jarnefelt, so that they would create the secondary parts of the mural. However, Gallen was not interested. That in mid-March 1892, the Gallens went to Paris for 2 months and in July traveled to Kuusamo. As a result of this trip appeared Shepherd of Ponajärvi. In this work, a departure from realism is already noticeable, as is the obvious contrast between the magnificent landscape and the poor boy. Taking elements from reality, the artist soon began to use his imagination to create images more suited to his purposes. Experimentation with new styles is also evident in this period. In his 1893 work The Black Woodpecker, executed in gouache, he creates a new, idealized national romantic landscape in which synthetic decorativeness and motifs of Japanese painting play an important role. Nevertheless, the creation of Sampo, completed in the same year, was still a realistically realized canvas of the transitional period. In the winter of 1893 to 1894, Gallen became fascinated by Nietzsche's ideas, and he began to be preoccupied with spiritualism and theosophy. The works of 1894 can already be considered symbolic. The main one is the painting problem. At the same time Mantiukowski and Journey to Tuonela were finished. This period also includes Ad Astra, Sibelius, composer of fairy tales and conceptual artists. Partially destroyed later by the author himself, in early 1895 Gallen traveled to Berlin on the recommendation of Adolf Paul. Together with Edvard Munch, he organized an exhibition there and also made drawings for the new magazine Pan. This trip influenced Gallen's style first and foremost. Exposure to German hobbies encouraged him to take up graphic arts. He learned the skills from Joseph Suttler. In addition, he became interested in the Art Nouveau movement and created his first tempera works in Berlin. The trip was interrupted by the death of the artist's young daughter Marjata in Ruovasi, where he left his family in the unfinished house Kallela. In May 1895, Gallen and his wife set out on a new journey. This time to London. They were going to buy a graphics machine and familiarize themselves with the technique of painting on glass. Obviously, the trip to England influenced the decorative aspects of his art. During 1895, the Kallela house was largely completed. The building of longitudinally hewn logs became one of the most famous examples of national romantic architecture. In Kallela the artist began to work on graphics. The first was the woodcut The Flower of Death. In 1895 he created the energetic engraving The Salvation of Sampo, and a year later he painted a tempera on the same theme. Portrait of a Mother was also completed in 1896. Lemminkainen's Mother, Jukkahainen's Revenge, and A Fratricide were painted in 1897. The Curse of Kullervo was completed in 1899. These were Gallen's most important achievements during this period. It was also then that he began to sign his major works with the pseudonym Gallen-Kallela. At the end of 1897, the Gallens traveled to Italy. The main destination was Florence, but they also visited Pompeii, where the artist studied the ancient fresco technique. Other passions of these years included the Art Nouveau movement with its interior and furniture design. Work on the Finnish pavilion for the Paris World's Fair began in 1899. Gallen was to paint the domed frescoes for the themes of the creation of Sampo, the rescue of Sampo, Väinämöinen's departure, and Ilmarinen plowing the snake field. In addition, he designed the Iris Salon for the Friends of Finnish Craft Association. This became Gallen's biggest international achievement by that time. Gallen is substantially credited with the popularity that the Finnish pavilion had. It was awarded 2 gold and 2 silver medals at the World Exhibition. After this intensive work, Gallen began in 1901, with funding from a private sponsor, to create the mural Kalervos Going to War in the music hall of the old student house in Helsinki. The outstanding event of this, Gallen's monumental period, was his work on the Sigrid Giselius Mausoleum in Pori in 1901 to 1903, designed by Joseph Stenbeck. The theme was the victory of death over matter. The main subjects of the main theme were spring, building, autumn, destruction, winter, and the subject along the Tuonela River, paradise and space, were depicted above the doors. The vaulted ceiling and beams were painted with views of Finnish flora. Some researchers have regarded these murals as a culmination in the artist's work. Unfortunately, they began to deteriorate over the years and were destroyed by fire in 1931. The artist's son Onni Gallen-Kallela recreated the frescoes based on his father's sketches. Large tempera sketches of the work have also survived. Work on the engravings continued during the period when the frescoes were being painted, the most famous being the engravings along the Tuonela River, 1903, and Mezzotinto, 1905. Gallen worked without sparing himself. In the following years, he constantly changed places of rest and traveled a lot. The level of creativity was also changing. In 1906, the magnificent portraits of Maxim Gorky appeared. He also wrote new paintings based on Kalevala. In 1905, the abduction of Sampo was completed, and the following year, the departure of Väinämöinen, begun 10 years earlier, important from a worldview point of view, was completed. The Complaint of the Boat was ready in 1907. Illustrations for the story Seven Brothers by Alexis Kivi appeared in 1908. The work is still a valuable example of design art, despite the fact that the illustrations have little to do with the writer's vision of the world. His first trip to Hungary took place in 1907, when the artist was awarded a large gold medal at an international exhibition. The following year he organized an exhibition of his works in Budapest. A trip with his family to Paris in 1908 was associated with the artist's spiritual transformation. However, he now felt uncomfortable in Paris, and the new art was incomprehensible to him. Väinämöinen's boat trip was an old subject that received a new reading in 1909. In May 1909, the family traveled from Paris to Africa. They stopped in Nairobi, Kenya, and did not return home until February 1911. The African works are very uneven artistically, but sometimes their coloring and the juxtaposition of color are unexpectedly successful. After a stay in the tropics, adjusting to living conditions back home was even more difficult than before. The design and construction of a studio villa in Tarvaspa occupied all of the artist's time between 1911 and 1913. Gallen-Kallela was invited to participate in the Venice Biennale, and the Italian government commissioned his self-portrait for the Uffizi Gallery in Florence. During the war, the artist's paintings remained in Italy until they were asked to be sent for the Panama Pacific exhibition in San Francisco in 1915. They won first prize and a gold medal. Gallen-Kallela was chairman of the Finnish Society of Artists from 1911 to 1915. It was a turbulent time when young artists were appearing before the public. Because of his status, Gallen-Kallela became the object of their hatred, and it was not in his character to back down. In general, the master's works, especially his landscapes, were already quite mediocre at this stage. In the spring of 1918, at the order of General Gustav Mannerheim, Gallen-Kallela worked in the Commander-in-Chief's headquarters, creating designs for flags, insignia, and uniforms. In March 1919, Mannerheim, now regent, invited him to become his first adjutant. Public recognition was manifested by his being made an honorary professor in 1919, and the University of Helsinki awarded him an honorary doctorate in 1923. In independent Finland, Gallen-Kallela still dreamed of creating illustrations for the Kalevala. The work was supported by the Kalevala Society, established in 1919. Kalevala Society. The society considered one of its main tasks to promote the illustration of the epic. Gallen-Kallela was deputy chairman of the society until his death. In 1920 an agreement was reached with the publishing house Werner Soderstrom that the decorative Kalevala, Karu Kalevala, would be published first, which was to be a preliminary work and a popular publication for the subsequent publication of the Great Kalevala, Sir Kalevala. In 1921 the Gallen-Kallela family moved to Porvoo, and in 1922 the decorative Kalevala was published. This publication has an enduring fame in Finnish design art. Gallen-Kallela was also one of the founders of the Finnish Academy of Art, the name used to refer to the governing council of the Finnish Art Society. He was its chairman from 1922. However, the artist did not fare well in Finland. In December 1923 he left for the United States. And in the fall of 1924 his wife and daughter followed him. They spent a long time in Taos, New Mexico, where the artist studied Native American art. In Chicago he also worked on illustrations for the Great Kalevala. In May 1926, the family returned to their homeland. The artist created his last major work, the mural Kalevala, on the dome of the lobby of the National Museum, reproducing the mural painted for the 1900 Paris World's Fair, in 1928. Only one subject was changed. In 1930, he was contracted by the National Bank to create a giant mural depicting the Haim Fair. However, returning from lecturing in Copenhagen, the artist fell ill with pneumonia and died in Stockholm on March 7, 1931. In 1935, a large exhibition in memory of Gallen-Kallela was staged at the Helsinki Expo Center. At that time, his work was controversial. Finnish national circles saw him as the greatest Finnish artist, while liberals who favored modernism held a different opinion. Nevertheless, Gallen-Kallella's status, first as a realist and then as a symbolist, was gradually raised. His versatility is noted, as well as his contribution to the creation of a new style. The entire visual style that we are accustomed to call national romantic was the creation of Gallen-Kallela above all. After the artist's death in 1931, his legacy continues to live on and inspire new generations of artists. The Akseli Gallen-Kallela Museum in Tarvasjärvi houses his works and is an important cultural center where art lovers can experience his work. Akseli Gallen-Kallela was an outstanding artist who left behind an invaluable legacy. His life and work have become a symbol of Finland's national pride and cultural wealth. His paintings, reflecting the depth of human emotions and the beauty of nature, continue to inspire and delight, leaving an indelible mark on the history of art.